Hey, what's up guys? Joker here, and I hope you're all doing well. Today we are going to be taking a look at the newly released Ryzen 3 CPUs in the form of the 3300X and the Ryzen 3100, which are comfortably priced around the $100 budget price point. The 3300X is $120, while the 3100 is $99, and both of these are pretty much identical processors. The only difference is that the 3300X is going to have a higher out-of-the-box clock speed, so if you don't want to mess around with overclocking at all between these two CPUs, I'd say go and grab the 3300X, but you could easily take the 3100, throw it on 4 gigahertz all-core, and in the process save yourself $20 if you're comfortable in doing that. Now, I'm going to be taking these processors and comparing them directly up against another Ryzen CPU, which has become very popular as of late, and that is the 1600AF, which until recently you could grab on Amazon for $85. However, they happen to be pretty much sold out right now, being from first-party sellers, and you have to go through a third-party seller, and they're now charging like around $150. So we're going to be comparing it against that because ever since these CPUs were announced, all I kept seeing in my comment section was like, oh, why would I get these? I'll just go buy a 1600AF right now for $85. It's not worth the extra $20 or $40 depending on, which version of the Ryzen 3s you would pick up. So yeah, that's what I wanted to go ahead and compare it against because that's what people seem most interested in finding out. As far as my test setup is concerned for this video, I was using an ASRock X570 Tai Chi motherboard along with a Fractal Design Celsius S24 cooler, which is a fairly affordable liquid cooler, but you could definitely get away with running these things on airs. They have a fairly low TDP of 65 watts, but the more you're going to get into overclocking, the more you might want to maybe consider grabbing a liquid cooler like the one I'm using here. I was also using 32 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance RAM at 3200 megahertz, and ignore the fact that there's a 2080 Ti in the B-roll you're seeing here. I was actually testing on the reference AMD RX 5700, and I wanted to do that for a couple reasons. Mainly, I just wanted to use a GPU which I feel someone might actually pair with these processors, although in all likelihood someone might even be using an older GPU and looking to get a CPU upgrade to go along with something like maybe an RX 580 or a GTX 1060 is a possibility. I would say the 5700 is kind of the ceiling on what someone would maybe spend on a GPU to pair up with one of these Ryzen 3 processors, and I didn't want to go super low end either, but yeah, that's why I decided to go with the RX 5700. It just seemed like something that someone might pair up with one of these Ryzen 3 CPUs. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me in my mind to go out and test it on a 2080 Ti because no one in their right mind is going to buy a 2080 Ti with a $100 processor. It's just not going to happen. So with the test setup out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the gaming benchmarks. I chose a few titles here to go ahead and just kind of see where these processors are at. We've got the average FPSs here, and then we've also got the 1% low, and I did run Cinebench R20 so we can get a direct comparison of multi-threaded versus single-threaded. Now, pretty much across the board here, you can see that these processors are extremely close, and it's really going to just depend on how much you want to spend on a CPU, because very few games actually seem to leverage the extra cores of the Ryzen 1600AF. So yeah, it's something like Division 2. It's like we're pretty much neck and neck across the board here, with the 3300X showing a slight edge at 81 frames per second. On Overwatch, the Ryzen 3 3100 actually edged out the 3300X by 2 frames per second, while the 1600 did fall behind as it seemed to favor the higher core speed of the 3300X and the Ryzen 3 3100. Borderlands 3 is basically identical across the board here, pretty much within margin of error, with the 3300X only winning by 1 frame per second. Shadow of the Tomb Raider definitely favored the higher single-core performance of the 3300X at 81 frames per second, while the 3100 was at 75, and then 73 for the 1600AF. And Far Cry New Dawn was very similar to Shadow of the Tomb Raider in that way, where it seemed to favor the higher single-core performance, getting an average of 113 versus the 107 of the Ryzen 3 3100, and rounding it off 105 for the Ryzen 1600AF. And we'll go ahead and throw up the 1% lows now here, where we're seeing pretty much an identical picture across all of the different benchmarks here, as far as where these different CPUs are positioned in the games that I chose for my test suite. And I did also run a Cinebench run on R20. As I mentioned, we've got the multi-core as well as the single core here. No surprise here that the Ryzen 1600 AF is winning on the multi-threaded test at 2788, with the 3300X coming in just behind it at 2631, but still very, very close, as that single core performance is certainly helping it out there in all likelihood, as in single core it ended up getting a score of 506, while the 1600 AF was 375, and of course the 3100 is sitting right in the middle here. So really the big takeaway from those benchmarks there, running at stock settings, everything, obviously, you could go out and overclock any of these processors. Everything there was just tested at stock settings, though. My takeaway from that is that for gaming performance right now, it seems like the 3300X is obviously the fastest one, but you could take the 3100 and crank it up to make it into a 3300X. Now, you've also got the 1600 AF, which is very, very close to these processors in terms of gaming performance, but that's only because a lot of the games that we had here seem to really favor the faster single-core performance rather than having the extra cores and threads that is on the Ryzen 1600 AF CPU, but that is something that will probably change in the future as more and more games do favor the higher core and thread counts, which would make the 1600 AF a very good purchase if you can find them for under $100, which is where they're meant to be priced. But as I said at the start, they're right now selling for around $150 from third-party sellers, so that makes it a very tough recommendation at that price. But if you can get it for $85, I would say that there's probably not enough of a reason to go out and spend the extra $15 on the Ryzen 3100 versus the 1600 AF. There's not, I would say just get the 1600 AF at that point. For $85, yes, absolutely all day. I would grab that, especially if you're going to be doing more than just gaming. So if you wanted to get into streaming, or if you're going to be making YouTube videos and encoding, running Photoshop, things along those lines, if you need those extra cores and threads, I definitely say 1600 AF all day. And if you are going to be doing those things, I would even pay above $85, probably around $100 would still be a fair bet for a CPU for you if you do need to take advantage of the multi-core stuff. But for just gaming right now, obviously the 3300X I would say is the best one, but you could turn a 3100 into a 3300X. So if you're comfortable overclocking, grab the 3100, and if you can find the 1600 AF for $85, grab that one. So it's not exactly a clear-cut answer. It's really about what you can get and what you're comfortable doing with it, and also what you need it for. So hopefully the information provided in this video does help make that decision a little bit easier for you. So really nothing too surprising at the end of the day here, but I was definitely curious to see if the extra cores and threads would have mattered on the 1600 AF, and it turns out that, not enough games seem to be optimized yet for those cores and threads, and the faster single-core performance from Zen 2 on the Ryzen 3000 series definitely seem to favor these new Ryzen 3 processors, which, I know I'm talking pretty good game about the 1600 AF here because it is a great deal at $85, but these are also an incredible deal for the price that you have. I mean, you're basically getting like a 7700K, which was like $330 when it came out. You're pretty much getting that level of performance in a 4-core, 8-threaded processor, which you can now get for around $100, which is absolutely insane. And you can pair that up, with a cheap B450 or even a B350 motherboard, as long as you flash the BIOS and update it to be able to support Ryzen 3. And then we've got the new budget boards coming from AMD in June, which if you get one of those, you'll be able to take advantage of PCIe Gen 4, which, maybe if you're building a PC with a $100 CPU, you might not end up using very much if you're not going to buy, a super fast NVMe storage or anything. So yeah, there's a lot of options still to weigh here, but as I said, I hope I made that decision a little bit easier for you. I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here, guys, though. If you want any links to where you can pick up the new CPUs as well as the 1600 AF, I will leave those down in the description below over to Amazon. If you enjoyed this video or found it informative anyway, leave a thumbs up on it, subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you tomorrow in another video.